Hey everyone, in this video, we'll do something a little different. Instead of writing Django code to build onto the application, we're going to go over some different built-in ways to query and filter objects from the database. There are more than what we'll go over in this video in the docs, but these are what I find myself using the most. Hopefully this will introduce you to some new tools you could use and add to your Django views. Let's start by reviewing the basic queries that we've already used before. So the code we'll write here will be the actual Django Python code that you'll write inside of your views.py. But I'm going to use the Django shell to get immediate feedback. That way you don't have to worry about writing any sort of view and then a template and display it on the template. This will be a much easier way to go through everything, explain it without writing all the extra code. But this is the exact code you'll write in your Django views to get specific objects based on your query. So to run the Django shell, you can look where we're at right now. I'm already in this directory for this project right here, and we have our manage.py file. So I already have my virtual environment activated, so we can go ahead and just run python 3 manage.py and type shell, and that will give us this shell right here. And from here, we can write all the normal code that we'll normally write to kind of test it out and get some interactive feedback right away. So we'll start with the basic query, which is just a .all and a .get. So for example, let's go ahead and we look at our models right here. Let's go ahead and let's go ahead and import our artist class and get all the artists. So to do this, I can do a from, and we'll do catalog.models, because this app right here is called catalog, and we have our models.py file there. And from that file, we'll import artist. And now from there, we can do an artist.objects.get or .all. And then here we'll return a query set of all of our objects. And so you'll see this query set here a lot in this tutorial. And all a query set is just a collection of objects from the database. It's similar to a list, but a little different. But for the most part, all you need to worry about is that it's a collection that you can go loop through and do whatever you want with it in your template, like you normally do in Django. So a .all will just grab all of the objects for that model. There's ways to override that and do more advanced stuff, but for now, we're not going to worry about that. The .all will just return every artist object we have. And like that, we can also do something similar to grab just a single artist object. So let's say we're going to grab this first one right here. And so right now it has a 1 here, which is its primary key. So we can use this to grab that object. And we can just do an artist.objects.get pk equals 1, pk meaning primary key, and that returns that single artist object. So that's probably a review. So hopefully that makes sense. That's just the two most basic things we can do with our models objects to get all of these objects we created based off of these classes. Let's go do some more advanced things and start filtering these objects. So first thing we can do is let's go ahead and just do a really basic filter, make sure that makes sense first. So using the artist import, using our artist model we just imported, let's go ahead and save the first artist to a variable first. Let's do an artist equals, we'll do an artist.objects get and pk equals 1. And then from here we can do an artist.name, and that's our artist name. So now let's go and filter and find every artist with this name. And we can do this very simply with just an artist.objects.filter. We can pass in any field. So in this case, we're passing a name. We could pass an email, bio, song, total, choices, or any field we have here, really. These main and many fields, which we have somewhere down here, are a little different. And these foreign keys can be a little different at times, but these basic fields here, we can just do it just like this. And all we'll do here is pass in the name of the field. In this case, it's name equals whatever we want to check it against. In this case, we'll put test artist. And it returned one object because there's only one artist with this name. And it has a query set again with an artist object and the same one, primary key of 1, the same one we had up here that we set it to initially. So that's great and all, but that doesn't really, that's still pretty limiting in what we can do. We may want to go ahead and see if the many fields. So for this album, this artist field here contains that artist. So how do we check that? Well, we have to do something a little bit different in that case. So what we can do is we can use a double underscore in syntax. And I'll show you here in a second. Before we do that, we need to go ahead and import model or our album as well. And we'll go ahead and import song just so we have it here. So we do a catalog.models import album, song, just so we have these available to us. And now let's go ahead and do that many filter. So what I'll do is I already have this artist saved here in this variable called artist. So I'm going to check for any artist where this is in the many field for the artist field on the album. So since we're working with our album now, we want to do an album.objects.filter instead of an artist. So we'll go ahead and type that first. Album.objects.filter. And in this case, for the double underscore syntax, that will look like this. We'll type the name of the field like we did before. In this case is artist. And we'll do double underscore in equals a list. So we'll put 2 square brackets and pass in anything we want to check against. In this case, we only have one thing, so we can just type artist. But we had another artist, we could type artist2 or whatever else through here, and it'll check all of those. But in this case, just one. So we'll just put just artist in the square brackets and then close off that parenthesis. And now it returns 2 different objects because both the PK of 1 and the PK of 2 have this artist right here set as the artist on the album. So this allows us to now filter many fields as well as all these other fields. So we can use that just to check and find different objects that match specific queries we're looking for. So we had a page here that showed all of the albums for this artist. We may want to run this command here to get all of the albums that match that query, so we can go ahead and show all of the albums for that artist or whatever. That's just kind of an example. So let's go to move on to the next thing we can do with this, which is allowing it to fail without throwing an exception. So if I were to type something like album.objects.get pk equaling like 1,000 or something that obviously does not exist, that throws an error. You'll see here, album matching query does not exist, which is fine. You could use a try except and you could catch it that way if you wanted to. But another thing I like to do is I like to use a filter to catch this instead and not throw an error. So I can use something like album.objects.filter pk equals 1,000, and then after that closing parentheses, you can do a dot first, because in this case, if I'm checking for a PK, there will only be one object anyway, at most 1 or 0. And so I can do a dot first just to grab that first one, which is the same thing we get from like a get that you'll see up here somewhere where we did that at right here. But in this case, it doesn't exist. So when I hit enter, nothing happens. There's no error. It just doesn't return anything because there's nothing that matches that. And so that's just an easy way to check if something exists without having to catch an error. And I like to do that a lot within the code, but either one really works fine. We can also limit these queries. So say we filter this, for example, this filter up here, we grabbed all the artists that match, all the albums that match the artist. But let's say we want to limit that. So in this case, we had 2. So let's go ahead and just keep it at 1. I could use this dot first, but for this example, I'm going to show a different way to do this. So what we'll do here is we'll do an album.objects.filter. We'll pass that same command, double underscore in equals artist inside of a list. And what we can do here is just like we do on normal lists, we can pass in a colon and then a number. I could use something like 5 and it limits it to 5. Oh, I spelled artist wrong. And in that case, it just returns a normal query because there's only 2. I could put that to 1. Now it only returns 1 object. And this is very useful for like pagination if you want to limit the amount of objects returned at once. So I could grab, the first 25 or whatever, doing this command here, and it will list the first 25. And then I could go ahead and have like a page next, and it could list the next 25, the next 25. And that just kind of makes it a little easier instead of having to load all of them at once into the template, which would slow your load times down a lot. So we can limit the queries using any number within square brackets with a colon and then the number after that. So that's a good way to query and limit, or that's a good way to limit your queries if you need to do so. Now up here, if we went back up to our minus all that, we use this double underscore syntax. This is very common in Django, and you use that a lot. Let's go through some other queries that use this to filter based on specific things. So we can do a lot of different things with this. We could do a starts with and ends with, exact, it contains, and many more. So let's go ahead and go through those real quick. So what I'm going to do is I'll query the artist again because I can use that name field. I think it's fairly easy to understand. It's just the name of the artist and sort of inside of text. I'll go and clear the screen here to make it not as messy, but we can also use exact and iExact. So let's type artist.objects.filter, and once again, the name field, name equal or double underscore exact. And exact will find an exact match, including the case. So if I put test artist like this, it'll return one object. Now if I do the same thing, but make it lowercase, it returns nothing because it's not an exact, because the case is different. Now if I do an I in front of that, now it's insensitive and it still returns the same test artist even though it's lowercase. And to continue on filtering these strings, I can also do a contains, which is just checking for text anywhere inside of the string. So if I just type in just test lowercase, it returns a bunch of different ones that all have test in it, and this is also not case sensitive, as you can tell, because this is lowercase and still returning the capital T and test for all of these. And that is just a bunch of different ways you can filter strings. There's many more. If you want to go through the documentation, I'll link it in the description if you want to go through that. But let's go ahead and move on to something else a little more advanced. So looking at our models here, let's say we wanted to go ahead and find any songs. So look at our song now. We'll find any songs where the album matches a specific name. So to do that, we'd have to go ahead and filter songs, then filter the album field, but then somehow filter this title field to match the title. And luckily, Django allows you to do that pretty easily. You can span relationships with this double underscore syntax. So I can go ahead and type something like songs.objects.filter, and I'm going to type album double underscore. So now I'm grabbing this field first on the song. Now I can do double underscore the next field, which is title. So we can go ahead and double underscore title equals, we'll say test album. So find any album with the title, any song, I should say, that have an album linked to it with the title of test album. I put songs plural, that should be just singular. Let's go and fix that. There we go. And now it pulled back one song that is linked to this album called test album. And so this is also very, very useful because I may want to have some filters built into the page where they can filter based off of specific albums or whatever else. And this gives us the ability to do so. Just the first field on the song and then the field on the album itself. And that will also only work for these relationship fields. If you try to do that on something else, it's going to throw an error. So make sure you're grabbing the right field that links it to another object before trying to grab another field. And now the last piece to this whole thing is the opposite of all this. So throughout this whole thing here, what we've been doing is we've been going through and filtering based off of queries and finding everything that matches that query. But what if we want to do the opposite and find something and just exclude everything that matches the query? Well, Django has a built-in exclude method to make this very easy. So let's grab all of our artists, for example, artist.objects.all, and then we can do a .exclude. And inside here, we can pass in whatever we want to exclude. So let's do a name double underscore ends with equals artist. So we'll find anything where the name ends with artist. We're going to remove that from the query. So I know this to object ends with a 2, I believe. So that will not show up. Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, this first one here ends with artist, so it will not show up. So it returns everything else. So since this first one is just test artist, we found every name that ends with artist. In this case, this one does, and we did not return it inside of our final query. And I think that can be used to remove anything from a query set that you don't need. And that is really it for this video. I just want to make a quick video going over how to query objects in the database. We're going to be using a lot of this in the future, and so this would just make it, in case you are unfamiliar, hopefully this makes sense what we're putting in. Normally we'll go into our views and we'll create a view and write all this exact code in there. Like we do these .alls or these .filters, we do all the time in our projects. In case you're unfamiliar, hopefully that helps clear things up a little bit. I'll link the documentation for querying the database in the description in case you want to read more about it. But generally, you can just use this double underscore syntax to kind of get whatever you need. There's more advanced ways we could use other things to do, but this is kind of the basis for all of that as well. So you'll need to know this before going into any of that as well. So hopefully all that makes sense. If you have any questions about how to query the database, let me know, and I'll try to help you with it. And the written tutorial will be in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.